Hi everyone, and welcome to the third video in my 2021 TBR series. In my last video, I shared with you the nonfiction books that I would like to read in 2021, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 10 fantasy books that I hope to get to in 2021. So unlike all of the other videos where the majority of the books I didn't own, this is actually one genre that I own quite a bit of that I would really like to get to. So without further ado, let's jump into the first book, which is Amber House. This is a book that I picked up on a whim on Book Outlet, and I got it, and then I never read it. And that had to have happened over a year ago, if not 2 years ago, so it seems like about time that I should read this book. So in this book, let's see if I can remember what it's about, we're following our main character, whose name is not mentioned on the back. Her name is Sarah, and I believe her grandmother has just passed away, and so she ends up going to her grandmother's like very big estate and searching for diamonds that are rumored to be like hidden in the walls, but turns out that this estate might be a little magical, possibly a little paranormal, as the house seems to come alive and maybe move around a little bit. I'm not 100% sure. I do know that it is the first book of a series, and I think the third book never got written. So that's a little disappointing because I know that I'm getting myself into something that is going to be incomplete, just in case I do end up actually enjoying it. So I am a little on the fence about wanting to read this book or not, but it has such a lovely cover. Like, I feel like a lot of people would think this is very cheesy, but I really like the cover, so I do really want to give it a read. I spent money on it after all, so I should probably read it. Next on my list, we have Splintered by A.G. Howard. This is by far the most shameful book on my TBR because this book was featured in my first ever book haul, which I uploaded the day that I created my channel, which was January of 2016. So that is how long this book has been sitting on my shelf waiting to be read, and 2021 better be the year that I finally read it. Once again, I don't exactly know what this book is about, but it is somehow centered around Alice in Wonderland, and I think it's like a kind of, not retelling, but almost like a continuation of the story, where we're following the descendants of the girl that inspired Lewis Carroll to write Alice in Wonderland. That's a very vague thing that I remember about this book, but I think that that's generally what this book is about. Either way, you guys know that I love Alice in Wonderland, so it is ridiculous that I have not gotten around to reading this series yet. Next, we have the beloved Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I have, once again, owned this book for a very long time, and I haven't read it yet. This is about a girl who ends up becoming the, like, king's assassin. That's all I know about it, and that's really honestly what has been keeping me from reading this book, because I feel like I'm going to like it. Generally, books that are as hyped as this one and are, like, most people really like this book, I think I'll probably enjoy it also, but frankly, like, an assassin kind of story doesn't really interest me. I'm actually far more interested in picking up her A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I know I could just skip this and jump into that one because the series aren't related, but I own this book, so I should probably read this one first. Bright Smoke and Cold Fire by Rosamund Hodge is the next book on my list. This is once again one that I have owned for a very long time. I bought this book after reading one of the author's other books called Cruel Beauty, which was a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and this one is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and it's the first book in, I think, a duology. I don't know why I rushed out and bought this book because I don't super remember really enjoying the Cruel Beauty book, so I don't really know why I bought this, but it's been sitting on my shelf for a very long time, so I should probably just give it a chance and see what it's all about and either, you know, read it and enjoy it or DNF it and get rid of it so it's not just collecting dust on my shelf. Another book that has been on my shelf for such a long time. This is just a compilation of all of the books that I haven't read. We have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is the first book in a young adult fantasy series. I actually still have the price tag on it. I bought it for $1.50 at, must have been one of my library book sales. And this is a very popular young adult book. Well, it was very popular when it first came out several years ago, because that's how long this book has been sitting on my shelf for. And I do actually remember reading the first chapter of this book and really liking the writing, but then for whatever reason never continuing on reading it. So I have kind of high hopes for this book. I think I'm going to enjoy it. Once again, I don't really know what it's about, but I do know that it is set in a fictional world or country that is inspired by ancient Rome, and I am obsessed with like Roman and Greek mythology and anything having to do with that, so the fact that it's set in something inspired by ancient Rome really intrigues me and makes me want to pick it up, so hopefully this year I will finally read it. Next, we have a book called Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is a standalone fantasy book. I think this is one of the few standalone fantasy books that I own, and I actually tried to read this once before. I just realized there's like an eye on the back of it. That was really cool. I don't know why it stood out to me when I turned the book around, but I actually did try and read this book, I think sometime last year, maybe the year before. Once again, aging, how long this book has been sitting on my shelf. But I read like the first maybe 2 or 3 chapters, and I wasn't super vibing with it, which I was very disappointed with because I've heard a lot of really good things about this book. So I ended up just like putting it down. Normally I wouldn't DNF a book that soon into it, but I really wanted to be able to fully enjoy it, and I'm hoping that when I tried the first time, maybe I just like wasn't in the fantasy mood. So hopefully when I read it sometime this year, I will really enjoy it. And once again, I'm very vague about what this book is about, but I think for the majority of it, it takes place in a library in which the books are kind of sentient, and I love a book about books. So hopefully now sometime this year will be the right time for me to pick it up, and I will really enjoy it because I've heard so many good things about it. Next on my list, we have The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This is the first book in a trilogy, one that I have again had on my shelf for a really long time. It's very fancy. It has a built-in bookmark, which I never noticed before, and really beautiful end pages and deckled edges. This is like a really nice book, but clearly I didn't look at it very closely the first time whenever I picked it up. But this is actually a dystopian fantasy book, so I don't know what the plot of it is, but I know that we're following a land in which there are like kings and queens, so you wouldn't think it was dystopian, but it's set in like the future where we have like abandoned all modern technology. And I've heard that it has a lot of like pop culture sort of references in it to show you how it is like set in the future. And so that really intrigued me, and it is definitely a very beautiful book. Not that we judge books by their covers on this channel, but yeah, I'm really excited to pick this up. I do actually already own the second book because I found both of them for really cheap at my library book sale a couple years ago, so hopefully I'll finally get around to reading this. And I feel like I remember a couple years ago hearing that this was being adapted and that Emma Watson was supposed to play the like main character, but I haven't heard anything about that since, so I'm not sure if I made that up or not, but if it is ever being adapted, then I would quite like to be able to read the book first. So those are all of the physical books that I own on this list. Actually, there is one other book that I do own. I actually own several copies of this book, but I couldn't be bothered to like dig for it because it's back there like behind all of the stuffies and stuff, like behind my bed, so I couldn't be bothered to get it out. But that is The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I'm hoping by the time I post this video I will have finished The Fellowship of the Ring, so I would really like to read The Two Towers this year. Given how many months it took me to read The Fellowship of the Ring, I think I'm not going to put The Return of the King on this list also, because Tolkien's writing, I just read it very slowly, and I think that is the best way for me to like fully appreciate the richness of the characters and the world and the writing and all of that. So we're just gonna put on this list The Two Towers. That's all that I hope to accomplish. If there's one book that's like at the top of this list, it is that book. I hope to have that book done by the end of this year, which is also what I said about The Fellowship of the Ring last year, and it didn't happen, but, you know, we're gonna try our best. So the last two books on my list, like I said, I don't own them, so I'm just gonna put pictures up on the screen. The first one is The Toy Maker. This is historical fantasy, and all I really know about this is that it has been recommended to fans of The Night Circus, which was one of my favorite books of 2020, and I know that this book is about magical toys. And my brain immediately thinks Toy Story, but I'm pretty pretty sure that's not really what the story is going to be like. Either way, it sounds super interesting despite not really knowing what it's about, but the fact that it has been recommended to fans of the Night Circus means it's pretty promising. Speaking of the Night Circus, the final book on my list is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, who is the same author that wrote The Night Circus. So this is actually a book that I have kind of avoided reading for a while because a lot of people didn't seem to really like this book, and I'm talking like people who were fans of The Night Circus didn't seem to like this book. I heard a lot of people describe it as being like really confusing or hard to understand or just doesn't make sense, and I was like, that does not sound like the book for me, because half the time I need my books to be like spelled out for me to understand what the heck is going on. So I kind of avoided this book until I heard somebody, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody absolutely gushed about this book and how good it was, and how it's kind of like an homage to a lot of other books, and that has a ton of literary references in it, and that was enough for me to totally want to read this book. As we've established, I love books about books. I love books that have like references to other books in them, references to pop culture, as we saw with The Queen of the Tearling. So I just immediately, after hearing somebody talk about this book in that way, I immediately wanted to read it. And like I said, I love The Night Circus, so if the writing is any similar to that, which The Night Circus was very atmospheric, a very character-driven book, so I'm really hoping that I will actually really enjoy this book and be able to appreciate it, and hopefully it won't be too confusing for me to understand. So yeah, those are the 10 fantasy books that I, fingers crossed, hope to get to in 2021. If you have read any of these books, let me know which ones you think that I should prioritize on this list, because chances are I will not be able to get to all of them. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?